Brilliant. Hello everyone. I'm glad to see we've got some good numbers in. 32 we're up to now, so fantastic. My name is Tom Cheesewright. I'm an applied futurist. I'm going to walk you through in the next 20 minutes some really critical principles, I think, for how we future-proof our businesses. Starting with a shift in philosophy that I started to see pre-crisis that's really been accelerated in this time, and going through 3 practical steps I think people can take in order to improve the resilience of their business, improve their ability to see what's coming down the pipeline before it arrives, and prepare their business to make those sort of agile changes they need to do. This is all part of my new book, Future Proof Your Business. It was due to be launched in July, but Penguin rang me up a few weeks ago when the crisis kicked off and said, look, we think this is really relevant to the current times. Can we bring it forward a little? And gave me all of 3 days to work out how to launch it in that time. So delighted to be able to talk to you about the book now. So let's kick off with let me get back to my slide deck. There we go. A really simple but really important, I think, philosophical shift that's happening now in business. If you think about any business book you've ever read, any strategy you've ever been taught about, if you've ever been to business school, so much of the stuff we get taught is really about optimization. It's about how do we do better tomorrow what we did yesterday, where better typically means with less resource, with more profit, with more growth, but fundamentally optimizing yesterday's business model over and over again. And this has been incredibly successful for a lot of people. This is sort of Joe Wick's lean in 15 approach, where we're making the business leaner and leaner and leaner. And it's been great for clients of mine like BMW, who've built their whole business, their success on this continuous process optimization, where they've just got better and better and better at doing what they're doing. And that was fine in a time where change was arguably happening pretty slowly, when you could sort of see these big, the big shifts that might disrupt a whole industry coming. But that's not the situation we're in now. You speak to people in business and 70% come back and tell me in a survey I did that they feel like change happens faster now. It's not that everything happens faster now, but we're facing these sort of waves of disruptive, what I call high frequency change, which are blowing through industries, turning them on their heads and forcing us to think differently. And so this sort of philosophical shift that I'm talking about is really a shift from one where the age of we can succeed by continuing to optimize and optimize to one that's much more appropriate for this age of high frequency change, where actually the most critical success factor for the long-term resilience, survivability, the ability of our business to thrive in the long term is our ability to adapt. And so what I was seeing before the crisis was already a lot of leaders in all sorts of organizations starting to talk much more about adaptability in lots of different ways. And BMW, I mentioned before, they talk about this idea of ambidextrous leadership. Can they now teach all their leaders not just to get better and better at what they do, but to be entrepreneurial and innovative and build the ability to be flexible and do something different? So the thing I wanted you to take away, and I'll come back to this at the end, but if you take away nothing else, is that actually adaptation is the most critical, the ability to adapt is the most critical success factor for a future-ready business, more than the ability to be optimized at what they do. But once you do that, if you accept that hypothesis, you say, well, then how do I build a more adaptable business? How do I build a more resilient business? And I like to talk about this idea of athleticism, athletic businesses, because if you look at the great athletes of the world, and I show every morning doing Joe Wicks to my kids that I'm not a great athlete, they really share some important characteristics. I want to talk through some of those characteristics with you today, because I think if you can transplant those athletic characteristics into business, you can build a huge amount of resilience and survivability and adaptability. And they really break down into 3 categories. The first one is about the senses, the business's ability to see what's going on, both in the immediate environment and the slightly more further term, the ability to respond to what they see happening, and the ability to actually just shape the business so that it can be transformed rapidly to new events, new opportunities. So let's talk through those in a bit more detail. The first one is about looking to the future. And I know this from my research, I know this from my consultancy, that most organizations are terrible at looking to the future. And my favorite stat that illustrates this comes from some research I did with a Canadian software company called Profix, where we surveyed a load of chief finance officers and finance directors around the world, and 2/3 of them told us that their annual budget, the one serious piece of planning that most organizations do, bears little or no relation to their annual strategy. So the one piece of planning that every organization does every year is usually done pretty badly. And a lot of FDs tell me that actually they don't even get to the end of the budgeting process. They just have to sort of fudge something together because it takes so long, it's so rancorous getting everybody to agree to a certain way forward. And what I try to advocate for my clients to do is actually to devote more time to looking at the future. I think anybody in a leadership position in an organization should be spending 1% of their time, one day every 6 months, focused on the future. And you have to do it in a really structured fashion to break you out of your thinking. If you've made it to a leadership position, the chances are you'll probably be an expert in your field. And that expertise blinds you to what's going on beyond. You start to hear yourself saying things like, oh, that won't work in this industry, or that won't work, that doesn't happen here. This industry is different. So you need is a formal process to break you out of that thinking. And what I try to get people to do is this. I say, go and speak to everyone in your organization, do an email survey, go and do some interviews or some focus groups, go and talk to your partners, go and talk to your customers, and ask them to tell you what frustrates them, what pisses them off. You'll get an incredibly sort of cathartic response from people because they like talking about this stuff. They like to tell you what's difficult, what stops them being productive, what stops them being as good as they could be. And what you know is this list of pressure points, things that are already causing you pain that you quite possibly didn't know about. And these pressure points where the cracks are going to come when external influences come in. So before you look at anything, you look at the cracks you've already got, the pressure points you've already got, and then you go and look at the external trends, the macro trends, what's transforming the world, and you see where those two things cross over. Now, those macro trends, I list 5 in my book, but go and read Wired magazine, go and read the FT, go and watch some TED Talks, go and look at what Amazon, Facebook and Netflix and TikTok are doing. And you'll see these trends quite readily, trends around automation and human augmentation, trends around the speed at which we expect stuff now. Bring those macro trends in, compare them to your pressure points, and you'll see something happening. You'll see each of those pressure points either getting worse as a result of those trends or getting better. And pick the top 5, the ones with the biggest effect of these macro trends, the things that are going to be really dramatic over the next few years. Deal with those over the next 6 months, repeat the process. One day every 6 months, looking at the future, talking to people, collecting ideas, mapping them against the pressure points that you already face, put them on the existential threat column of your to-do list and deal with them. And it's a really good process, a really good mindset to get into. The second thing we have to do, though, is if we can see these things coming, we have to work out what we're going to do about them. We have to work out how we're going to accelerate our decision making based on what we see in order to be able to respond quickly. And again, clients tell me this is a big problem for them, that actually they just don't take decisions fast enough. There's lots of wrangling, committees, information moves slowly, loads of bureaucracy. And we've got to sweep all that away in order to make decisions much faster. And there's really 2 ways you can do that. You can look at how information moves in your organization. You can maybe invest in some software, streamline some processes to get that information to move more quickly from the edge of the organization where it comes in to the decision makers, or you can push the decision-making power out to the edge of the organization. And I keep telling my favorite story about this, which is from Lidl, 2015. Lidl has just rolled out One Direction Easter eggs onto the shelves, those weird middle aisles where you can get everything from a set of air tools to a riding crop and helmet. One Direction Easter eggs sitting pretty just as Zayn leaves the band. This information breaks on social media, comes in through Twitter to Lidl's social media marketers, who turns with tears in his eyes to the merchandising manager and says, look, Zayn's left One Direction. What are we going to do about those Easter eggs? She thinks for a second and says, do you know what? 1/5 of the band's gone. We'll knock 1/5 of the price off. And he says, great, I can work with that, and gets a tweet out and drives hordes of crying One Direction fans into Lidl stores. And what's amazing about that story is those 2 people making that big commercial decision that affected every one of their stores were in their early 20s. They were junior people at the edge of the organization. And the point about acceleration is that whole process, that big commercial decision, took just 20 minutes from the tweet coming in to the tweet going out and the information being spread out to all the stores. The third thing we have to do is reconfigure our organizations to be much more adaptable. And the shift here is really one from the equivalent of a die-cast toy to a box of Lego bricks. What we want is organizations that are built of little bricks that we can dynamically reconfigure. And I talked to my client Audi about this, and I used the Audi Quattro. Anybody of my vintage will recognize this car and be a bit excited about it, perhaps. Certainly if you're a car fan like I am. And I want you to picture this in your head. It's Christmas time, sort of 1986 probably, and your child is obsessed with the rally-winning Audi Quattro, and they want one for Christmas. And you have two choices. You can give them the die-cast toy Audi Quattro, which looks just like the real thing they've watched on telly, or you can give them the Lego Audi Quattro, which doesn't look just like the real thing, if we're honest. It's a sort of approximation, but it's got knobbly bobbly bits all over it. Which one are you going to give them? Now, chances are on the day they'll be happy with both. But we all know, anybody with kids knows that within an hour, a day, or a week, they're going to get bored. They're going to get bored of that toy. Now, what happens if they get bored of the die-cast one? If they want to change it into something else, they're going to need an angle grinder and some super glue. I'm giving you some insight here into my childhood, but let's be honest, it takes a lot of effort to change that die-cast toy car into something else. But if they've got the Lego one, sure, on day one, it doesn't look just like the real thing, but it still scuds across the kitchen floor quite happily, and you end up treading on it. They can still play with it like the toy. But when it comes time to change it, they can rip it to pieces and build it into a dragon or a dinosaur or a spaceship or a unicorn or whatever excites them that day. And even better, when their friends come round, they can play with the same Lego bricks that make up the Audi Quattro and build something of their own. And this is the way increasingly future-ready businesses are being built, not as these sort of die-cast monoliths that are perfectly optimized for what they are, but actually as these slightly less efficient, slightly more knobbly-bobbly constructions that may not be just as efficient today, still do the same job but not quite as efficient, but they can be ripped apart and reassembled to meet the future needs. So the company that really caught on to this earliest, the company that really understood this so well, is Amazon. 16 years ago, Jeff Bezos, the chief executive of Amazon, sent a memo out to all the people in his organization. And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, break your functions down into bits, wrap them in the digital equivalent of Lego's knobbly bobbly bits, and give me a box of Lego to play with. And the result is that Amazon now can rapidly reconfigure its business to meet new opportunities and new needs. And Amazon can let other people come and play with its Lego bricks, which is how it built Amazon Web Services, one of the largest cloud hosting companies in the world and responsible for 80% of Amazon's profits. What it used to be was just that Lego brick that was just an IT function within the business. So I've rattled through there 3 lessons, 4 really, if you count that piece about the shift in philosophy. The first one to take home is that we have moved. Things have changed. You have to reconfigure your business to be fit for the 21st century. And again, sporting analogy is apt here. If you took the best footballers from the first division in the 1970s and dropped them into the Premier League today, they would struggle miserably because they were perfectly optimized for the game they were playing 40, 50 years ago. They're not optimized for the game that is today. The game has moved on and business has moved on. And we've got to change our philosophy from one that was appropriate even just 10, 20 years ago to one that's appropriate for this age.